Hello, I'm Paul Laney, the retired sheriff from Cass County, North Dakota, and the current vice president of national sales here at Turnkey Corrections.
And I'm Lauren Matthews, and I'm the current social media and content specialist here at Turnkey.
And this is JailTalk. And today on JailTalk, we're going to do things a little bit different. I'm turning it over to Lauren because I'm her guest today.
That's right. Today we're going to do something a little different. So Paul, while he's still the co-host, he's also the guest. When I was talking with our producer about what we wanted to do for the upcoming shows, we kept coming back to the topic of leadership because we think it's always a relevant thing, especially in law enforcement and the sheriff's world. And then we thought, well, who do we want to speak to about leadership? And we really didn't get very far because we thought of Paul right away. He's not only a leader at our company here, but he's also had a lot of experience with leadership. He was in law enforcement for years. He was a sheriff for years. And really, there was just no one better. He has a class on leadership that he's taught all over the country. And so we're going to bring you just a little bit of a taste of that today. So, and then we'll have a part 2 coming as well. So I'm going to give a little bit of Paul's background here. So buckle up, everyone. Sheriff Paul Laney retired, is a North Dakota native, and was raised in rural Cass County and attended school in West Fargo, North Dakota. He enlisted in the United States Marine Corps in 1984, and in 1989, he was hired by the Fargo Police Department in August of 1989. Sheriff Laney served in many capacities with the Fargo Police Department. He served as a patrol officer, gang narcotics investigator, field training officer, and tactical team member. He was elected to 3 4-year terms. 3 4. I'm just gonna. Okay. Sheriff Laney was elected to 3 4-year terms as sheriff, and he retired from a 30-year career in law enforcement on December 31st, 2018, and became the vice president of national sales here at Turnkey. He has served on the board of directors for the Dakota Territory Sheriff's Association and has served on the board of directors for the North Dakota Sheriffs and Deputies Association. He also served on the board of directors for the North Dakota Association of Counties and the board of trustees for the United Way of Cass Clay. Sheriff Laney served on the board of directors for the National Sheriff's Association for 6 years and still serves on 3 national committees: the Drug Enforcement Committee, the Awards Committee, and the Homeland Security Committee for the National Sheriff's Association. Sheriff Laney hosted a weekly radio show called Law Talk with Sheriff Laney on KFGO Radio from 2010 to 2012. He was named the E911 Institute's Government Leader of the Year for 2011 and was the National Sheriff's Association 2012 Ferris E. Lucas National Sheriff of the Year. On August 13th, 2015, during the North Dakota Peace Officers Association Annual Conference, Sheriff Laney was presented the Lone Eagle Award in recognition for his outstanding and dedicated law enforcement in the state of North Dakota. He was also presented the National Sheriff's Association 2017 President's Award for his leadership and service during the Dakota Access Pipeline protest. He has 2 grown daughters who both attend college, and he lives in Grand Marais, Minnesota with his wife, Patty. I need a drink of water, Paul.
Well, hopefully I can back some of that up with the experience. I'm very honored that when you guys came to me and said, hey, we got an idea for the new show. And of course, I'm always excited about what we're going to do on JailTalk. So when you and our producer, Katie, came and said, we want you to be the guest and we want to talk leadership, it's humbling because I've you do your thing the years you're in service, and you don't so much go out and try to make your mark. You try to earn your keep. You want to go out and earn your respect. You want to be able to walk amongst your peers in the law enforcement community. You belong and know that you're earning your right to be there. And through that time, I got to have some amazing experiences, and I got exposed to a lot of things, from as a young patrol guy who just wanted to go out and serve his community and be on the streets and make my community safer, to being a tactical team member, ultimately going up to be the full SWAT team commander for many years, and then on to my sheriff time. And your leadership is such a broad term, and we all have different aspects of how we perform as leaders, what we expect as leaders, what's our exposure as leaders, what type of leader do you want to be. And I was just very blessed to have a team that, hopefully earned their respect, and I was able to go forth and apply a lot of the principles I wanted to apply, which is a big reason why I ran for sheriff, which I know we'll talk about here in a little bit. And throughout the years, you also feel you have a responsibility to give back. And so I did a lot of teaching. I taught at 2 different universities, and then I taught a lot in the law enforcement world. And then through my experiences, I was able to travel the country. I spoke about the pipeline protests and our experiences there. You want to help your brothers and sisters in law enforcement be ready for that kind of nightmare. And as we see around our country right now, they're living it again. And so anything you can do to help, anything you can do to help prepare them and share your experiences, I feel I have a responsibility to do that. And even though I'm gone, you're never really leave. And I will always look back on that 30 years. I don't regret 1 second or 1 minute, all the good, all the bad, all the ugly. And now I have a chance to give back. Todd allows us to do the JailTalk, and I want it to make a difference. As we've said all along, we want to make a difference. And so that's a long-winded version of saying I'm very honored to be able to come in here and share my experiences and why, what gives me the right to sit here and talk. So hopefully it'll resonate with all of you out there, and obviously, hopefully it helps any of you that are looking for some advice. So, I always say, and what I'm going to do today, I'm not going to talk about the way. I'm going to talk about our way. It was what worked for me. It's the kind of leader I was, the influences I had, the people that affected me made me the leader that I became. And we're going to talk a little more in depth about that. And if you like it, use it. And if you don't like it, don't. Because I said, it's our way. And, if there's something that works for you, I always joke and I always tell everybody, and I shouldn't even say I joke, I'm serious. When you're in school and you copied off somebody else's paper, which I know you didn't, but if you copied off somebody else's paper, what was it called? Plagiarism, right? Yeah. Or if you stole somebody's other information. What's it called in the real world? Best practices. So, if you can learn from somebody else, one thing in law enforcement we're good at is if somebody has found a better way of doing something, we model it, we role model it, because our goal at the end of the day is to make everybody better, everybody safer, everybody stronger. And if I could do my little part to help, I'm very, very honored to do that. So thanks for having me.
Of course. I think we should kind of set the stage for everyone, because everyone heard all of your awesome accomplishments. But like we said, you wore blue and brown for many, many years. But can you tell us why you actually decided to run for office? And then once you were elected, what were some of the goals you had going into it?
It was very interesting because I looked at the time that I decided to run for office was right around that 2005 time range. And I'd been at the Fargo Police Department for, 16, 17 years, closing in on 18 years. And I'd gone back, I'd finished up my master's degree in the early spring of 2006. And I was hungry. I was ready to spread my wings. And I had looked in good faith at, at my own department at that time, the chief's opening was there. At the same time, I was considering running for sheriff, and I applied for that in good faith. But at the back of my mind, I knew that it was going to be a campaign year for sheriff. And I was just in a place in my career where I felt I could affect change. And I know, and I've learned since then that I am a change agent kind of leader. I'm not a long-term maintenance guy. I'm a change agent guy. And I learned that about myself as the years went by. And I just knew I was hungry to try something else. And certainly I could have given a good run for chief. And I just decided at that point that I used the day that I pulled my name from consideration and made that announcement out to the public. I went and talked to the mayor and the city administrator at the time and said, hey, I am so honored for the opportunities I've had, but this is what I'm going to do at 3 o'clock this afternoon. And I kind of used that as my lead into to the media that this morning Paul Laney withdrew his name for consideration for chief of police for the city of Fargo, and as a major announcement to make this afternoon. And I knew, I was known in the community. I was known in the law enforcement world. I was a district commander. I was a lieutenant at the time, so I had a lot of ties to the media. And I knew that would at least let them go, whoa, what's he up to? And, everything's strategic. And obviously when you run a campaign, it's strategic. And I was running against a 28-year incumbent. And I needed to, to really get it out there. So that's what we did. And I unveiled it. And the big reasons were, I wanted to test my leadership skills. And I wanted to bring the organization to a new level. And I believed I was a very progressive leader. I was somebody that I was always hungry to learn more and try more. And I just felt the sheriff's office fit me perfectly because I'm a people person. As you guys know, I'm kind of like,
what? You like to talk?
I know. What a shock, I engage with people because I love people and I like to bring out the best of people. I like to coach. I like to mentor. And I just thought, what a perfect place that fits my personality. And you work for the people. You belong to the people. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on when I talk about my philosophies. I belonged to them. Yes, I was an elected leader. Every day I went to work, I belonged to them. And I'll talk about that when we talk about my philosophies. But it did me very well over that time frame. And I just knew it was going to be the right fit. And so I ran, I was elected, and I took office on January 1st of 2007. And best 12 years, law enforcement years I could ask for. And I, as you saw from my bio, a lot of the things that we've talked around here, I had some pretty intense times in my years as sheriff, from 3 major floods to 2 train derailments to the pipeline protests that seemed like they would never end. And but I wouldn't trade any of it. And at the same time, I also got to coach and mentor and do the things I wanted to do. I wanted to be a law enforcement leader in the law enforcement world at all levels. You know, I wanted to establish consistency and balance throughout my organization. And I brought in some concepts that weren't so super popular at the time, like an internal affairs unit and that we called the Office of Professional Standards. I brought in, general orders and a strong roadmap, because I had a strong belief that how do you know where you're going if you don't have the roadmap to get there, and a lot of structure. And I implemented a leadership philosophy that we'll talk about a little bit later on. And it, in the end, some people, I think most people liked it. Some people didn't. Like in every situation, you have to make some very tough decisions with certain people. And, I was just hungry at that time to do all of that and make those changes. And, no regrets. And that's why I ran. I wanted to affect change, and I just wanted to be that person they elected. And, to me, and I think to anybody that wears that sheriff's badge, when you wake up in the morning and the people said, we choose you to be our chief law enforcement elected leader, man, there's a sense of pride that goes with that, a sense of honor that goes with that, and then there is a huge sense of responsibility that goes with that. And I just didn't want to let anybody down, so I hit the ground and running, and I never looked back.
That's awesome. Well, you kind of touched on it with philosophies, and what we've talked about is every leader is a little bit different in how they lead and the philosophies that they follow in order to be that leader. What does leadership mean to you, and what was your philosophy as you went through all your years of leadership?
There was a couple sayings, and we're gonna talk about one of the sayings here that we're not going to actually really answer till the end of part 2. And a lot of what we're following today is the leadership class that I've presented around the country. And I will say I had a saying that I followed a lot. It was one of my favorite sayings. Was that leadership transforms potential into reality. And I always looked, whether I looked around my office, whether I looked at, if you're a coach of sports or whatever the case would be, you look at that potential. And how do you make that potential a reality? Because don't you just wake up one day and you say, we're going to be a great organization. Or you don't wake up one day and say, I'm going to be a great hockey player. No, you work hard. And you have to develop that potential and strong leadership within your organization. It's not only you as the sheriff. You're a small piece of the pie. The buck stops with you. You have to have the vision. You have to have the ideas. You have to be strong, and you have to push your people. But you also have to put the right leaders at the spot to share those philosophies. And I'll talk a lot about that when I talk about the philosophy I used. But I always believe that we as strong leaders, we could transform that potential into the reality. And I take a lot of pride when I look back on my time, is when people say, what was your greatest honors? And while you read my biography, I'm super honored by all those awards. How can you not be honored and humbled by that? But I didn't earn them. I didn't, that wasn't me. That was an amazing team of men and women behind me that I just got to be the face of those awards. And any leader that tells you, I was sheriff of the year and I was this and I was that and I'm all that in a box of chocolates, first of all, is pretty arrogant. And two, is somebody I probably don't want to follow, because if they think they're that high on themselves and they're that good and that people didn't get them there, they're probably pretty dangerous too. And I don't respect that, and I don't believe that. I am honored by those awards, but I didn't earn them. I was the face of them. The team that I built and the team that was behind me is how I earned Sheriff of the Year and the Government Leader Award and all the incidents out of the pipeline, all the things that happened out there. To be honored by the President's Award was unbelievable. But that was the men and women out there standing the line, that gave me all they had every single day. And that's what wins that. And so that's what I think, mattered more to me than anything, is he was taking that potential and turning it into those realities, and then going forth and being part of that group. I was super honored to be part of that. My philosophy is I believe in servant leadership. That is, there you got a lot of different types of leadership philosophies out there. Mine was servant leadership. I believed in servant leadership to the core of my being. I knew it wasn't about, you all work for me and I'm going to tell you how it's done. The dictators, the authoritarians, there's all those leadership philosophies out there. We could go into hours on that. And in the class I break them all down. I didn't believe in that. I believed in being a servant leader to the community and building a team behind me, second to none. And one of my biggest honors, people would ask me, is it the awards? Is that? No, it's the men and women. When I left, it was time for me to go because it was their turn. And they were strong and they were proud and they were ready to take all of it on. And it was the team I built. That's what I'm the most proud of with that. And my servant leadership philosophy was exactly that. It's I belong to the public. When I talk about that, when I say that I looked at it when I woke up every morning that I work for you, I do. Now, that doesn't mean I was a lackey. Doesn't mean I was like, whatever you say, I'm going to live in fear of the media. I'm going to live in fear of probably no. But my philosophy every day was you gave me the honor of putting me in this chair, and I'm not going to let you down. I belong to you. We work for you. It's not us versus you. I am you, and I represent you, and you chose me. And so that servant leadership philosophy served me very, very well because that's who I am. And I think you guys see that here.
Oh, for sure. Definitely.
I very much, that's not just a word or a name for me. It's how I live and how I lead. And it's how I lead my team now.
Yeah. When you talk about pulling that potential out of people and transforming that, would you say that's servant leadership is how you did that? Or for all the leaders out there, how do you, you talk about pulling that potential out of people. How do you actually do it? What are maybe tips you have, or what worked for you when you were sheriff or a leader?
That's a great question. I would say it definitely falls right into that because I didn't tell them how to do things. I coached and mentored them. I showed them the path. I showed them as we're going to talk about here in a little bit, my drive the road philosophy. I showed them the road and I showed them the ditches. I showed them the parameters, and I got the hell out of their way and let them go show me why they were put in those spots. So I trusted them. I believed in them. And I taught my philosophies. I definitely held accountable to the servant leadership philosophy and the parameters that we set and the roadmaps that we set. But I let them go be them. And I'm going to talk way more about that here when we do talk drive the road philosophy, because you can ask anybody that worked for Sheriff Laney back in his day, did they know the drive the road philosophy? And you'll get probably some funny and maybe some colorful replies. But, that's the best advice I can give is you put the right people. Jim Collins used to say, the right people on the bus. And that's a great book that I read. And I read a number of leadership books that really had an impact on me. But one thing I took out of that whole book was put the right people on the bus. And that's one of the things I did is I built my team. I put the right people in the right spots. And then I got out of their way and I let them go do their job. And when they go forth and succeed, they get stronger and they grow and they develop and in the end, they make you look like a star. Because you're not one person that doesn't trust everybody else. That you have to have all that control because you don't think anybody else can do it as well as you do it. That's a style, it's a way, and there are those that lead that way. It certainly didn't work for me because then it's all on you, and people are afraid to make a mistake. People are afraid to grow. They're afraid to spread their wings. I was just the opposite. Spread your wings. Try. You're going to make mistakes, and I'll talk about that when I talk about the philosophy because it applies right in there. And I lived that. I lived that every day. It's how I looked at the environment. So my advice is put the right people on the bus and let them go do their thing. Because in the end of the day, when you got 10 leaders out there shining and go towards, certainly makes the man or the woman at the head of the end of the ship there look pretty good. And you got a lot of people out there doing it for you. Not to mention, there's just that sense of fulfillment and that sense of camaraderie, and that we're doing it as a team. And when you go into a fray, whether you're going into just a decision that affects the department or you're going into a major critical incident, you're going in as a united team. You're going in as a united family. And that was just important to me. And that, again, it's our way. It was my way, and it worked very well for me.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great philosophy, and I think all of us here at Turnkey see that in you, a lot of that philosophy. Another thing that's really important to you is communication. You are very big on reiterating and making sure everyone's on the same page. I know sometimes you take a little slack for it, but it's a good habit to have. So can you tell us why communication is so important to you? in your current job and why it was so important to you in law enforcement.
I used to always tell everybody, and, when I'd have my mom, communicate. And you're right. You guys, I mean, it's funny that you say that because you guys do tease me because I go very in depth on things sometimes where at some point, you can see people. And I got that when I was sheriff, and I got that. And again, it was a way that worked for me where some people are very good at maybe just, boom, this is what I want, and you got to go figure it out. I was just the opposite. I wanted to lay the parameters. I wanted to lay out the expectations. I wanted to lay out my thoughts. I wanted to make sure they had a full understanding because I didn't want to leave them hanging. And so, yeah, I do go a little in depth. I do communicate. I do, follow up with an email or a phone conversation, or I'll sit down and reiterate something a couple of times. And sometimes, you and I like to tease each other a lot.
Yeah.
But we work so well together, and you get the eye roll. Well, I know I'm getting close to I'm probably hit the parameters of what they want to hear, but at the same time too, then you never have to doubt, where I'm at on a topic. And so I always say communicate. And when you think you've communicated enough, communicate some more. Because what's the one thing you always hear, especially in the law enforcement circles, everyone, nobody communicates around here. No, there's just no communication that goes on around here. And I always tried to take that to heart. That's always one of the easiest things for people to follow. But nobody tells us anything. We're on the night shift. We're just, just we're mushrooms. Just keep us in the dark, and things like that. And I always tried to alleviate that with communication and trying to overly communicate. And I did that in a lot of different ways. And especially when there was going to be change or there was going to be things coming up, it's always funny because I can look at everybody listening to me out here. What do cops hate? I don't care if they're licensed peace officers out in the field, they're correctional officers in the jail. They hate change and they hate the way things are. So, one of the ways you're going to have to go one way down a path. And I just believed when we were going to make change, you communicate it and you make sure everybody's on the same page and you implement it. So the pain is a lot less. And then I just did a lot of things like in my sheriff time, a lot of the things that worked for me is I didn't just try, because, communication by email is a really dangerous way to go. If you're going to do everything by email, how many times have we all had an email get misunderstood? Or you don't know the emotion behind it or the passion behind it. Sometimes even the intent behind it, if it's just a short, cryptic one. So, email is a great communication tool. I wouldn't necessarily make it your communication method. It's a tool. It's a way to do. But I try to do well beyond that. I try to do things. I did a monthly command staff meeting, which I had. There was over 30 people in the room because we were 24/7, 365. Agency. I had a 350 bed facility. We were a full service sheriff's office. So I had every entity you could think of, from the field guys, the patrol guys, the civil process, warrants. You got your narcotics guys, your detectives, you got everything happening out there, and they're going 24/7. But for that one day, it was that fourth Wednesday of every month, we all came together. And yeah, it was long for those night shift sergeants and lieutenants that had been out, or the captains. But we had to have that day, and it was important that, we all know it, every month on that day, 9 a.m. till noon, we're together. And we're going to talk about, we'll have the agenda, it'll be well in advance. Anything you wanted, if you were one of my supervisors, Lauren, anything you wanted on there, you let me know because it'll be on the agenda and you're going to get your time. And it was just our time, was that time to communicate and talk about ideas and beat it up. And I had two philosophies, both there and at my command staff meeting, which was weekly. I'll talk about that. Is anything's on the table, and you can disagree with anybody as long as you do it respectfully. You don't take cheap shots or take a personal shot at somebody. We would have, and even me, if I had a hot new idea, here's your chance, okay? Here's your chance, Lauren. Here's your chance, Sergeant. Here's your chance, Captain. Let's debate it and lay it out there. And again, I had the parameters on the respect part of it, but anything's on the table, even if it was my idea. I didn't want a bunch of little yes men and women. I wanted that interaction and I wanted that challenge. And I had some good devil's advocate people. And we, at the end of the day, came out with the right decision that I felt was best for the entire agency. I had well over 200 staff. And I needed to make sure that we were all on the same page. And at the end of the day, when I made the decision, then we're all moving forward together. And it was your idea, great, and the others didn't necessarily agree. At the end of the day, we could debate it all we want. When we walk out of this room, we're on the same page, and you're supporting it, whether you agreed with it or not. And gave everybody that vocal time to do that. I also did weekly command staff meetings. That was my white shirt people, my lieutenants and above. That was every Monday at 9 a.m. We kicked off the week together. Okay, what happened over the weekend? What do we got coming this week? What's on your plates? because that might be the last time we're all in the same room together, because we were a very busy agency. And as a sheriff in a community of the size that Fargo was, and then the Fargo-Moorhead metro area was close to 250,000 people. We had a lot happening inside. We had a lot happening outside. But that was my time and their time with me. And it was always filled. We very rarely ever finished early, but that was another way for us to communicate. And then I would do unit meetings. I would get together with the units, each of the units. I'd try to get out as much as I can. And if they were working a site, I'd make them come to me. If they were working 11 o'clock at night, I'd go meet them at 11 o'clock at night and chat with them. Our jail teams were 12-hour shifts, so I'd go catch them at their shift briefing for the night shift, and I went to them and see what's on their mind. I tried to do that as regular as I could and as regular as my schedule would allow. And then I had a thing called the Sheriff's Leadership Advisory Committee. I should have thought that one through, because like all cops, they gave it an acronym, and they started calling it SLAC. We got a SLAC meeting.
You walked right into that.
I didn't think that one through, did I? But the advisory committee was every unit in the department got to elect a member. And the only parameter I had was it couldn't be a supervisor. It had to be a line level member from that group. Each team got to pick their person, and it started out monthly, and they got to the point that by the third, but we started doing them quarterly, because there was a lot of things they bring and then a lot of things they did. And what I brought with this, like I said, and I'll use it as an example, and people can, whether they think it's, I said, listen, this is about substance. This isn't going to be a complaint session, because a lot of times I'm going to refer you right back to the chain of command. But it was an ability for them to communicate with their sheriff. There'll be like 10 of them in there, and me. And I did, like I said, I didn't let it turn into a complaint session, because 9 times I said, well, did you follow your chain of command? Did you talk to your corporal, your sergeant, lieutenant on that? But what I wanted it to be was something about substance or new ideas or new concepts. If you come to me and you start telling me there's not enough, we're going to turn this into, there's not enough toilet paper in the men's locker room, if you can't find where the toilet paper is stored, we probably got a bigger problem. That's not what I was looking for. That you solve that through your chain of command. But substance, and a lot of really cool ideas came out of that, and it was just a chance. And I really saw that as time went on, and they had a chance to air it, the issues got less. And then we ended up moving it to a quarterly meeting, and those meetings were pretty full. We do them, and it was just another way to communicate. And then I set access times to me. I said, especially early on in my first term, I said every Tuesday from 8 till noon, and every Thursday from 1 to 5. My assistant at that time, Jackie, knew that if Lauren called, she's a patrol deputy and she's out in the field, and they get 30 minutes, and they get 30 minutes. And if I'm there, granted, sometimes I had to move it around because events happened, or a public event happened, or something, or a critical incident happened or something. But otherwise, outside, if I was in the office and you wanted 30 minutes of my time, and you wanted to talk about the color of the sky, that was your time. And I really made sure I was accessible to them. And it just, they could never say there wasn't an ability to communicate to the man at the top. They couldn't say that they didn't have access to me, because they very much did. And I tried to honor them as much as possible. So I tried it a lot of different ways. And I think as law enforcement leaders, you got to look at your environment, and you got to make sure that they can find you and they can get you. And then a lot of times you got to go to them, and you got to be ready to hear some things you don't want to hear.
Right.
Got to have tough skin, because sometimes they don't always like the ideas that you've brought forward, but also gives you a time to communicate to them.
Right.
And like with the advisory committee, they could go back to their team, their people. I didn't do an agenda. They would set the agenda. And maybe my part was a new policy or new procedure. I would get that time to explain that to them so they could understand. It's so often, and it's so funny, because I'll guarantee you every sheriff and jail administrator or supervisor out here is listing as, they're just doing this to mess with us. I sat in a lot of law enforcement leadership meetings in my career, and never one time ever did we sit around and say, let's just implement this one to mess with them. Never did we do that. So, it gave me a chance to explain a policy, explain it right to them. And then I always told them, I'm not going to hand you minutes. It's your responsibility. You're their elected team member. You take notes. You go back and explain it to your team in your words. And that way they got it right not from them, not from me capturing the minutes. You capture the minutes of your team and go back and tell them. And so it was just, again, another way to communicate internally. And then obviously I was very accessible to the public. I was a very transparent sheriff. I believe, if the media wanted my time, I belonged to the public. I went back to that servant leadership, but the public needs to know what's going on. We didn't hide stuff. And so, that spent a lot of time on media interviews and following up on things, but I never bunkered up and hid because, you got to earn that trust. You got to earn that trust internally from your people, and you got to earn that trust externally from your public.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, I can attest of your skills with communication. And I think, like, you think about the alternative, some people say, like, oh, this meeting, it could have been an email or it could have been this. But when you think of the alternative of under communication, like, that can be kind of scary to think about, especially when you're talking about law enforcement. Like, that's like probably the best place to over communicate. So I think all the tips you gave were perfect.
Thank you. And you're right. I mean, it is one of the biggest things we do. And I think it's something that you got to give attention to. If you're in a supervisory position, like I've told, I used to tell our corporals and our sergeants, like, listen, the day you said, I'll take those, the day you put those on your sleeve, whether it was the sleeve, the stripes or the bars on your collar, you've taken that responsibility. It's not just to get maybe a better shift or a higher paycheck. You've said, I'm going to be that leader. I'm taking the responsibility to take these stripes and go be that role model and be that coach and that mentor and take that extra time to communicate. You said it. You took the promotion, and I held him to it.
Well, earlier you told us that you believe in servant leadership. Is there more you can tell us about that? Dive a little bit deeper into that?
I can, and it goes a lot, and a lot of it came from just my exposures. Like I said, I'm not here to talk about the way. I'm here to talk about a way that worked for me. I did believe in servant leadership. I believed I belonged to the public, as I said earlier. I believed that, they are why I was in that chair. And, my family will tell you, I used to say, hey, let's stop by the grocery store or stop by here on our way home for 5 minutes. And my daughters would roll their eyes and my wife would have 5 minutes, right? And I also used to always tell them, and I was one blessed. My wife, Patty, was one of my biggest, staunchest supporters and understood this. She got this. And she'd been in public. She was an assistant city attorney for the city of Fargo. So she understood that environment. She understood that commitment to something bigger than yourself. And my daughters grew up in it. They grew up in that law enforcement world. They understood it. They didn't always have to like it, but they lived through some pretty intense times too as family members. But they knew that when we walked out the door, I wasn't just Patty's husband anymore, and I wasn't just Danielle and Katie's dad anymore. I was Sheriff Laney, and I belonged to the public. And so we go to the grocery store, and, I might be in the dairy section, and if somebody came up to me that, hey, you're Sheriff Laney, I see you on TV all the time, right? And they wanted 5 minutes of my time, I'll be honest, for that 5 minutes, that person was the most important person in my life. Because if they're going to take the time out of their day, out of their shopping schedule, out of whatever their afternoon or morning was or evening, to come talk to me, then who am I to be too busy to talk to them? And that's that part of that servant leader, that part of that public servant that it's like, yeah, we might be about 10 minutes late to get where we're going, but I am not going to walk away from this person feeling that and leave them feeling that they didn't matter to me, that I was too busy. And and of course we had that little, my wife would come up and, hey, we're going to be late for that event. We really need to get going. And if somebody then, because there was some that then also didn't have any boundaries and maybe wanted to take too much, but I always was going to make sure they had that time, and I didn't care who it was. And they were going to be the most important person at that moment in time. And that was a big part of what I did. A lot of that too, I believed in leading from the front. I used to always say, and that's probably the old Marine in me. I was taught very well, and I'm going to talk a little bit later on about who had that impact on me and who had some of the biggest impact on me. And a lot of that came at 18 years old. I was exposed to some of the most intense, best leadership training in the world in the United States Marine Corps. And it really set a foundation for who I became as a young man and who I became as a future leader. And, I used to always say, just because I hold an office doesn't mean I need to sit in it. And I always was out amongst my people and out into the public. And, my office time, I did my office time, usually later at night when everybody was gone so I could do my own thing. But, I believed in leading from the front and setting the tone and being the examples. One of the things I always said as leaders, I think as good leaders, you need to know when to lead, you need to know when to follow, and you need to when to get the hell out of the way. And a big part of that, when there was a major incident, when there was a major thing where people are looking to the sheriff for a leader, I'd be the first. That was when the Marine in me would come out, right, on me. We're taking that hill. I mean, philosophically, whatever the issue was we needed to solve, I got it. And let's go. And I was going to lead them and be there with them and and bring the right people that we needed to. There's a time that you need to follow. When I first came in, I came from the land of blue. I was a police officer. I put a lot of people in jail, but I'd never run one.
Right.
But I had leaders there that knew the corrections environment inside and out. And I learned so much in that first term, to the point I work for a corrections technology company now. I mean, talk about the world coming, full circle for me. So I followed a lot. I asked a lot of questions, and I trusted them. I put the right people in the right spots. I believed in them, and they never let me down. And so that was sometimes, even though I was the boss, I was the sheriff, it was my time to follow and to listen to what they had to say. And then there's just a time, if you put the right people on the bus, I said that earlier, you get the hell out of their way. Let them go forth and show you why I led them. Set the parameters, set the tones, and turn them loose. And let them go show you why they were hired. And I just always utilized a lot of those principles. I was always pushing myself to be better. I was a big novel reader. I like to read a lot of the spy thrillers, the Tom Clancy's, the Vince Flynn's, things like that. But I made myself, every 10th novel, I had to read a leadership book. It was just my personal development, my personal discipline thing. Every 10th book, you can't read for you're going to read to make yourself better. And I always tried to push myself to do that and to make myself stronger that way. And one of the courses I took was a Dale Carnegie course, and it was phenomenal. And I learned one of the principles that I would talk to our people about was appeal to their nobler motives. To my staff, remember who we work for, remember who we belong to. And I would appeal to that. You guys represent them. You're part of them. You're their protectors. I just didn't take it for granted. I wanted them to feel that pride. Like, guys, how many get to do what we get to do in life? Less than 1% of society are law enforcement officers. So we have that honor. So I would appeal a lot to their nobler motives, and be noble and know what we stand for. And a lot of thing is, there was another part on the worry stress, because there's no stress or worry in law enforcement at all.
Can imagine,
What a shock to think that the things they go through, and especially in current times. My gosh, our profession is under attack like never before, and it's really, really hard to see. And part of that worry stress section, part of it, there was a saying. They said, unjust criticism is often a disguised compliment. And sometimes you just got to be strong enough to weather through it. And that criticism is actually a compliment that you're doing it strong. They don't agree with you, but you got to get through it. And so I always tried to find my motivation from that, and then just be a leader. I really strongly believed in developing my people and not tearing them down. You correct in private and you praise in public, and you can correct a lot of things without humiliating people. I'm not a fan of the dictator who walks around. And I came from the Marine Corps. Believe me, there's a lot of yelling. There's a lot of intensity, but it's for a purpose. And I never believed in walking through the office and jacking people up or yelling and screaming because I'm having a bad day. That type of thing is just not my style. And I believe you do a lot of damage when you do that. You humiliate somebody in front of their peers. That could be do permanent. You could do years of damage to trust, but you also could do some permanent damage, or you lose good people. And I don't believe in that. And I think we're a leadership team. Let's be a team. And that was always my philosophies.
Well, we're about ready to close out this show, but don't worry, everyone. We have a part 2 coming. But before we close out, Paul, I can't remember if you shared this quote or not, but I know you have a favorite quote.
I do.
So I think you should share that with everyone, because I think that's a great way to close out this show.
It's perfect, and I didn't. It's great moments are born from great opportunities. Great moments are born from great opportunities. And when I teach the class, I always ask that. And there's usually some that know it right away and many that don't. But that is a quote that Herb Brooks gave to the men's Olympic hockey team in 1980 in Lake Placid, just before they went out and beat the Russians. Something that was no way supposed to happen. I'm a huge hockey fan. I find a lot of motivation in sports in general. And great moments are born from great opportunities. So I'm going to ask everybody to remember that, because at the end of part 2, we're going to talk about that and how that had such an impact on me.
Great. Well, until part 2, we'll come back so you can find out more about that. But until then, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at JailTalk Podcast, or you can email us at jailtalkpodcast@gmail.com. So until then, I'm Lauren Matthews.
I'm Paul Laney, and I've been really honored to be here. You're a tough griller, man.
Hey. Got to do what I got to do.
All right. We'll see y'all next time.